Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Surface podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, I just want to take a moment to thank you for all the amazing feedback on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It really means a lot to see that you're enjoying the podcast. Thank you all. Today, I want you to imagine a scenario. You're stuck in traffic. The clock is ticking and you're already running late. You can just feel the frustration bubbling up. Maybe you start blaming the driver in front of you, or maybe you're just wishing that you had left home earlier. But let me ask you, does any of that actually change the situation? Now, I'm not here to tell you that just stay positive or pretend that everything is fine. That's not what this is all about. But what if instead of letting frustration control you, you took a deep breath and accepted that right now, at this moment, that there's nothing you can do to change the traffic? What if instead of fighting reality, you shifted your focus to something within your control, your mindset? This is where Stoicism comes in. It's not some cold, emotionless philosophy. It's actually one of the most practical ways to deal with everyday challenges, whether it's traffic or bigger life struggles. So today, we're diving into Stoicism, what it really is, how it can help you stay calm under pressure, and how you can apply it to your own life. Let's get into it. So, what exactly is Stoicism? It's an ancient philosophy that started over 2,000 years ago in Athens, founded by a guy named Zeno of Citium. But the Stoic ideas we talk about today mostly come from three key figures: Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius. Zeno's journey into philosophy started in the most unexpected way. He was a wealthy merchant sailing across the Mediterranean when disaster struck. His ship was wrecked and he lost everything. I want you to imagine that for a second. One moment your future is set and the next it's all gone. Stuck in Athens with no money and no clear path forward. So he wandered into a bookstore and started reading about philosophy. Something about it just clicked. When he asked where he could find real philosophers, he was pointed toward the great thinkers of the time. That moment changed everything. He studied under different schools of thought, learned from the Cynics, and eventually developed his own philosophy, Stoicism, a way of thinking that helped him rise from the lowest point of his life to build something greater. Even though we often associate Stoicism with later figures like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, it was Zeno's shipwreck, what seemed like the worst moment of his life, that set everything in motion. Now, here's the thing about Stoicism. It's not about shutting off your emotions or pretending that life doesn't affect you. It's about recognizing what you can control and letting go of what you can't. Stoicism didn't just appear out of nowhere. Like most great ideas, it was shaped by what came before it. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, was actually a student of the Cynics. The Cynics believed in rejecting society, living simply, and being completely self-sufficient. Think of Diogenes, the most famous cynic. He lived in a barrel, mocked authority, and even dismissed Alexander the Great to his face. But Zeno didn't fully agree with this extreme way of life. He thought you could still live in society, have responsibilities, and even hold power, as long as you remained virtuous and disciplined. That's what led him to form Stoicism. At the same time, there were other schools of thought that saw the world differently. Epicureans, for example, believed that key to happiness was pleasure, but not in a reckless way. They thought avoiding pain, living simply, and surrounding yourself with good company was the best way to find peace. Stoics, on the other hand, didn't seek pleasure to try to avoid pain. They embraced challenges, believing that true peace comes from within, regardless of the circumstances. And then there were the skeptics. Their whole thing was questioning everything. They believed we could never be truly sure of anything. So the best way to find peace was to suspend judgment altogether. Stoics disagreed. They believed that even if we don't have all the answers, we should still strive to live with wisdom, courage, and self-discipline. What's really interesting how Stoicism even shares some similarities with Buddhism. Both philosophies teach us that suffering doesn't come from events themselves. It comes from how we react to them. Both emphasize letting go of attachment, staying present, and focusing on what's in our control. It's fascinating how two philosophies from opposite sides of the world reach such similar conclusions. So, while we often talk about Stoicism on its own, it's actually part of a much bigger conversation. a long history of people trying to figure out what it really means to live well. One of the most famous Stoics, Epictetus, put it perfectly. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Think about that for a second. Life is unpredictable. People will always disappoint you. Things won't always go your way. But the one thing you always have control over is how you respond. Marcus Aurelius, who was literally the emperor of Rome, used Stoicism to keep himself grounded despite having power over millions of people. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That's the core of Stoicism. It's not about controlling the world, it's about controlling yourself. And when you master that, life becomes much easier to navigate. That's exactly what Marcus Aurelius explored in his book Meditations, written nearly 2000 years ago, yet still a guiding light in our modern world. Meditations reminding us that true strength lies not in changing fate, but in mastering ourselves. Even though he was one of the most powerful men in the world, he understood that true strength came from within. His writings were like personal reminders to stay grounded, to focus on virtue, and to accept what he couldn't change. The impact of his words didn't stop in ancient Rome. Centuries later, they became a source of strength for one of history's most remarkable leaders, Nelson Mandela. During his 27 years in prison, Mandela faced isolation, injustice, and unimaginable hardship. But instead of being consumed by anger, he embodied stoic resilience. Like Aurelius, he focused on what he could control: his mindset, his dignity, and his ability to forgive. And when he finally walked free, he didn't seek revenge. Instead, he led South Africa through a peaceful transition, proving that true power lies in mastering yourself. That's why meditations still matters today. It's not just philosophy, it's a blueprint for resilience, no matter what life throws your way. Now, let's get practical. How do you actually apply Stoicism in your daily life? There are 3 key Stoics principles that can help you handle stress, setbacks, and even difficult people. One of the biggest causes of stress is trying to control things that are completely out of our hands. We obsess over what people think of us. We worry about things that haven't even happened yet. We get frustrated when life doesn't go our way, but Stoics teach us to focus only on what we can control. Take a job interview, for example. You can't control the interviewer's mood. You cannot control who else is applying for the job. But what you can control is your preparation, your attitude, and how you present yourself. When you accept that, you free yourself from so much unnecessary stress. So, next time when you're stressing over something, ask yourself, is this something within my control? If it is, take action. If it's not, let it go. This one might sound strange, but Stoics actually train themselves to imagine worst-case scenarios. Why? Because when you mentally prepare for something going wrong, you're less likely to panic when it actually happens. Let's say you're about to give a big presentation. A Stoic approach will be to ask yourself, what if the projectors stop working? What if I forget my words? What is the worst thing that can happen? By doing this, you remove the fear and realize that even if things don't go perfectly, you will be okay. Seneca put it like this: Europe's present ills of their power, who has perceived their coming beforehand. So instead of hoping for a perfect outcome, prepare for all possibilities, and you will handle anything with a clearer mind. One of the most powerful Stoic ideas is that every challenge is an opportunity. Lost your job? Maybe it's a chance to start something new. A heartbreak? Maybe it's a lesson to make you stronger. Marcus Aurelius said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Basically, whatever is blocking you isn't stopping you, it's shaping you actually. So the next time you face a challenge, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "How can I grow from this?" I know all of this sounds great in theory. Control what you can control, prepare for the worst, turn obstacles into opportunities, but let's be real, this isn't easy. Stoicism isn't about magically shutting off your emotions or pretending you are unaffected by life struggles. It's about training yourself over time to respond differently. Because, let's be honest, it's a lot easier to lose your temper than it's to stay calm. It's easier to blame the world than to take responsibility. It's easier to complain than to accept and adapt. But everything comes with a price. You can either pay the price of discipline and self mastery, or the price of stress, frustration, and emotional chaos. The Stoics didn't promise a life free of problems. What they offered was a way to handle those problems with strength, wisdom, and resilience. If you are willing to adapt this to your life, this philosophy can change the way you experience life itself. Now that we have covered the principles, let's talk about how Stoicism applies to the world we are living in today. So, how does Stoicism fit into our modern world? Because let's be honest, we are not Roman emperors or ancient philosophers. We are living in a time of constant distractions, social media pressures, and an overwhelming amount of information. But here's the thing, Stoicism is more relevant now than ever. We live in a time where everyone's life looks perfect online. It's easy to compare yourself to others, feel like you're behind, or get caught up in negativity. But a Stoic approach, detached from things outside your control. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And isn't that true? Half of the time, the stress we feel comes from overthinking, comparing, or worrying about things that don't even matter. A Stoic doesn't let external noise dictate their inner peace. No matter what you do in life, someone will always have an opinion about it. And in today's world, criticism is louder than ever, especially online. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. That means that you cannot control what people say, but you can control how you respond. If someone criticizes you, instead of getting defensive, ask yourself, is there any truth in this? If yes, learn from it. If not, why waste your energy? A Stoic doesn't react emotionally to negativity. They stay focused on what matters. Let's say you get stuck in traffic, spill coffee on your shirt, or have a rough day at work. You can either get frustrated and let it ruin your day, or take a deep breath and accept it, and then you can just move on. Because at the end of the day, your reaction shapes your reality. Marcus Aurelius said, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It's all within yourself, in your own way of thinking." So, if you take anything from this episode, let it be this. Control what you can, let go of what you can't. Prepare for challenges so they don't shake you. And remember, the obstacles is the way. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Alright, we've covered so many things about Stoicism, but here's the takeaway. Stoicism isn't just one-time fix, it's a practice. It's not about instantly becoming a Zen master or having a perfectly calm mind all the time. It's about gradually shifting your mindset, choosing how you respond to life, and becoming more resilient over time. If you want to start applying Stoicism today, here's what I suggest. Start small. When something happens that's out of your control, stop for a second and ask yourself, can I control this? If you can, take action. If not, let it go. Focus on what you have, not what you don't. Seneca said, "A wise man is content with what he has." At the end of each day, take a moment to reflect on your thoughts and actions. Did you respond with wisdom? Did you let yourself get caught up in things that don't even matter? Remember, Stoicism is a journey, and as with anything, it takes time to see the results. But if you commit to it, you will start seeing life in a whole new light. So that's all for today's episode. I hope you found something useful in the wisdom of Stoics. Of course, there's so much more things about Stoicism that I haven't even mentioned in today's episode. Concepts like amor fati, primatio malorum, and the dichotomy of control. Philosophers like Zeno of Citium and Musonius Rufus also had profound insights that we didn't dive into, but I wanted to keep this episode simple and digestible for everyone, giving you a solid starting point. Thank you for your valuable time and for taking the time to listen to this episode. As always, remember to stay grounded, stay resilient, and keep looking beyond the surface. Stay curious and see you next episode.